A lot of you know I have a huge love for guitars. I actually own a company that makes tools that help people set up and build guitars. And I scratch build, put together kits, and work on customer guitars as well. And a lot of that work happens out here in my shop where there's a welding area behind me and there's big woodworking equipment that you can't see on the other side of this camera. So today we're going to build a toolbox to keep all those guitar projects safe while they're out here in my shop. To get started, I want to show a couple of the tools I use, and this isn't to make a bunch of sales. There are other companies who make these, but Guru Machine Works, which I'm part of with another YouTube creator, Tom's Tool Room, we make these little squares, these little 2-inch squares, and these, we made them for doing work exactly like what you're getting ready to see. If you want one, great, you can visit my website. If you don't, there are other companies who make them, and you can also use bigger squares and that sort of thing. These things just work extraordinarily well for working in steel tube. The other tool is from Randy Richard in the shop, and this is a carbide scribe, and this is invaluable for getting accurate cuts in steel. Now, if you're just hacking together something with a bunch of butt joints, maybe this isn't the right tool, but if you're using mitered joints and you want them to be accurate and you don't want them to open up and you want them to be very weldable, these tools are wonderful. I'll leave a link to Randy's YouTube channel in my description. We're going to start by laying out 4 pieces that are 45 inches long. And I've just got my tape measure. I put my square right at the 45-inch mark. And then I'm going to pick up my scribe and I'm going to scribe a line right at 45 inches. I like to get everything close and then put my blade down right on top of the work to make sure that I am right on the line. Then I tighten everything down and make my cut. So this is where I stopped last night, basically getting the entire space frame or exoskeleton or whatever you want to call this in place and tacked up. And there's a reason I don't do all my finish welds as I'm going, and it's because as you let these things cool down, as they settle, they start to rack and do all kinds of weird things. I don't have a big fancy fabrication table, and I would assume a lot of you out there don't either. So you have to get creative and you have to be able to sort of rough things in and then square them up. And the way to do that is to tack things in place, check for square, and then use things like these ratchet straps to bring everything back in. Then you do your finish welding while the straps are still on, as many of them as you can keep in place without it burning. But you do that, and then as the entire thing cools, it will hopefully square. And if it doesn't, then you can put several ratchet straps in one place and you can sort of force it to do whatever it is that you want. But as I was going around, I have a couple of these squares. They're 12 inches by 12 inches, and these were cut on a water jet. They're 1/4 inch thick metal, and they're really, really handy to either put somewhere and clamp and pull things together, or just to check square on big pieces of work. And I noticed this morning that I was out 1/8 of an inch in some places, 1/8 of an inch over 1 foot. You know, these are almost 3 feet tall. That could be 1/4 of an inch out. And with some things it doesn't matter, but if you're putting drawers into a case, it does matter. These things have to be as square as we can possibly get them. So I'm going to use these ratchet straps to bring everything back into square, and hopefully we can get within about 32nd, a 64th, somewhere in there of being square across the whole thing. Here we can see one of the offenders. The gap is bigger at the bottom than it is at the top. It kind of touches up there, which is great, which means that the whole thing needs to lean that way, which means we need to put a ratchet strap in there that pulls the opposite corner in and makes that square. Perfect. Well, here we go. All of the straps are on and tuned. A lot of tension in those. They can put, I think these straps, there we go, are rated for just almost, what, 750. So they can put a lot of pressure on there, and sometimes you have to use 2 straps in tandem on these things, but this is a good way to square things up if you don't have a big expensive fab table. We're going to turn our attention now to the drawers for this case. So I've got MDF for the bottom, and then I've got plywood for the sides and the backs of the drawers. I did a quick little sketch of how my whole sheet of plywood will work out. Since it's pre-finished plywood, it's a little bit spendy. So I worked out all my cuts and where they would go in the plywood, and I've cut the piece of plywood, I'm gonna say in half, but not directly in half, about 45 inches. So I have enough room to make all of these cuts for the drawer sides, and they're 43 1/8, as is the bottoms of the drawers. So I've got my table saw set on 43 1/8. I'm gonna cut all the bottoms and all the backs to width so that they're the exact same dimension. Next, I'm going to cut this half of the piece. Along that line, I've given myself an extra a little bit, so I really need about 20 3/4, and I've set us up for just over 21 inches to allow for all the curves and mistakes and all those kind of things. But my shop is not set up to handle big sheets. As you can see, I just don't have a ton of room in here, so cutting it in these smaller pieces makes it really easy to work. Now we got to cut these into 4-inch strips, and then we'll cut this piece in half and then into 4-inch strips as well. Probably like a lot of you guys out there, I don't have a ton of room. I don't have like a big layout table or assembly table or whatever they call that. I do have a table behind me, but it's always got a bunch of projects on it. And so I used my table saw and I just put some paper down so I don't get glue all over the thing. I sanded down the finish on the joints that are going to get glued on the back and sides. So I'm going to glue it and then pin nail everything to let the glue set up and dry. Done welding a bunch of these little brackets on here, and I used a quick little jig using a piece of flat plate and a vice grip and just kind of laid all these out and zapped them all in. So this will hold the wood that we have, this plywood, this birch plywood. It'll hold it back from the face just a little bit, but since these are all perfectly spaced, I got holes drilled in them for fasteners. That'll be awesome. So I have all these drawer slides that will attach to the inside face of the birch plywood, and that'll bring everything out flush with this steel tube. The drawer slides will attach to these, and that way the drawer slide can pass by. If you mount it directly to this plywood, it would just run into the face of this and you wouldn't be able to get the drawers open. Should be a pretty cool little detail. I went ahead and laid out screw locations, 4 screw locations to hold these to the pre-finished plywood sides. And I went through and put all the holes that line up for how this slide is going to attach, so I could make sure that my holes would miss those holes. Whenever I'm getting ready to set up gang drilling like this, where I just need to drill a whole bunch of the exact same thing, I always do wind up setting the depth stop so that we get a very accurate hole that's repeatable over and over. The key here is that this plywood here that I'm using is fairly thin stuff. So with the screw ran all the way in, we're going to take a look, and that will be a safe distance. I definitely don't want to over drill that hole or we'll be in trouble. Holes drilled, pre-filled with screws. So now we're ready to lay out the sides to receive this block. We have the right side done over there. We have the left side done over here. I double checked that we got them to the right side, that they're all opening properly. And then the soft closers all work. Those are pretty sweet. So now we've got to mount these sides into the cabinet. Time for a little quick math. We've got 30 inches here and we have 5 drawers, which means we'll have 6 gaps in the drawers. And I want the gaps to be 1/8 of an inch. So 6 times 8, right, is 3/4 of an inch. 6 times 1/8 is 3/4 of an inch. So we've got 29 1/4 to work with. So we've got 5 drawers to fill 29 1/4. That works out 585 is the drawer height that I need to maintain that all the way up. So that's almost 7/8. So we'll work with that on the table saw and we'll get it just the way we want it at the almost 7/8, and then we'll come in and we'll test fit everything. And if we need to trim a little bit off of each one, we can do that. So I'm measuring from this middle rail down to the frame, and we're at 1 3/4. So we need to take off 1/8 there for the gap. So 1 1/8 5/8 is what we need. So if we come up from the bottom of this drawer 1 5/8 inches and mark it both sides, we should be able to attach our slide runner. And when I set the drawer where I want it, I want front of this drawer to be even with the frame here. That should put this mechanism right at the front edge of the drawer. I've cut a little jig out of a piece of scrap hardwood and I screwed some plywood to the bottom of it. So I just cut the hardwood, I'm trying to get that to sit still. I cut the hardwood at 1 5/8 inches. So as that goes, I've got a nice 1 5/8 inches tall square here. And I'm gonna clamp it to the side, and then that'll make all the drawer slides exactly the same as we install them. Cool, right? Our drawer is back a little bit from our frame, which is what we expected because we lined this right up. So we have room to pull that forward. We'll do that in our adjustments later, but the drawer slides really nice, not hanging up, soft close works. So rinse and repeat. There we are with all 5 drawers installed and sliding nicely. Soft close is working, which is always a good sign that you're not pinching. I've always experienced that it's better to have the drawers a slight bit narrower than too wide. If they're too wide, they will definitely bind on your guides here, on your slides. And if they're a little bit more narrow, you can absorb some of that. These things have a little bit of play kind of this way, but definitely not that way. Let's look at the drawer pulls and the drawer faces. So I have some African mahogany, which is one of my favorite woods to work with. It's inexpensive, and when you oil it, it gets pretty dark and it looks super nice, and the grain is fairly straight. You look through at the run out on a long board like this, and there's barely any of it. It's very stable wood. So I've got plenty here to cut off. Again, we're looking at about 5 7/8 drawer front. So I've got plenty to sort of pick and choose the lumber I want. I'll definitely be cutting the sapwood off there. Then these poles, this is an aluminum pole from Orange Aluminum. I'm not getting paid by Orange, but I thought these looked really nice for the pole. So they mount, if this is my drawer face, they mount on top of the drawer face, and you can create screw holes back here if you want to keep them all hidden, or you can do screw holes on top. I think I'm going to put my screw holes in on the back side. I think they'll just look sweet that way. Thicknessing all the boards for the front of the cabinet. I picked out boards at the lumber store that I thought were of similar color, and I've got 3 that are this kind of blondish, and then these turn a little bit red. So I may do it every other thing. I may group them together. I'll have to see how they turn out. But got the Laguna 16-inch spiral head, just eating planer chips or eating wood or something today, surfacing some boards for my other operation as well. So here we go. It's time to cut our aluminum poles. This is what I use to cut aluminum. I use it on my little circular saw over there, and it does just fine. In the table saw, it does even better. So just remember, the label actually faces in on this blade so that the teeth come down as the blade is turning. Can't get over how nice these aluminum poles from Orange Aluminum look. You can see the profile of them there. Sorry I didn't bring you guys along for the CNC here, but we've got some pretty cool stuff happening. I did want to bring you along. I've got this lamb's tongue detail that I wanted to do here on the edges. So just the lower edge. So the handle of the drawer is going to be here, and I didn't think it was important to break the edge next to that. In fact, I thought it was important to keep it straight. So I just kind of picked a dimension that I thought would look good here for the bevel, and then for it to lamb's tongue out. And then there's a bevel along the bottom edge as well, and then into another lamb's tongue on that end. So I'll just show you how I've got that marked out. Basically, we're just freehanding it here. And the edge of this plate is one of my marks, and then this line is equidistant to that line. And then I've got a little 45-degree bearing, riding, chamfering bit in here. And I just kind of go back and forth and make it work. Time to get the drawer pulls put onto the drawer faces. Just got to flip it and make sure we're on the top instead of the bottom. There's all 5 drawer fronts against the old refrigerator there as a mock-up. Looking really good. I'm super happy so far. Now we just got to get them put on the front of the case here. And I did cheat off camera. I went ahead and put these pieces on here, glued them, and Brad nailed them so that we can screw the front drawer face through the back of these. Getting the drawers put in, and I'm using a couple hotel keys there. 2 of them was the right number, plus an 1/8" welding rod, and then an 1/8" welding rod on either end to space them away from the case. Unfortunately, I have to keep my hand here because it's top heavy, it wants to tip over. So I'll set the camera down, you can just watch me put this one in. So we've got them all in. Those work nice. Soft closers are working. Man, yeah, I couldn't be happier. Just got to plug these holes here, and then I'm going to put a few screws in from the backs of the drawer front just to kind of take some of the pressure off of these screws that just go literally right into the drawer sides here. So that's not the best attachment method, but it seemed like that was going to work really well to temp them in there. So I'll dowel them up, clean that up, and we'll move on. Here's how the drawers turned out. 2 guitars fit in here just beautifully, almost like we planned it that way. I used some toolbox drawer liner for the bottom of the drawers. I still need to use some spray adhesive and get it stuck to the sides. It's just kind of laid in there for right now. We'll get it straightened out and smooth and all that. A couple neck workstations, which I can leave a link in the corner there to that video. I make a bunch of those for Skyscraper, and every once in a while I have issues with the CNC, so I have plenty of extras of those to use in this cabinet. I did use some wipe-on poly for the face of the drawers. Not terribly happy with that. I think I had 6 or 7 coats on there. It was a Watco product. Maybe I just didn't expect how many coats and how much it would raise the grain, but I much prefer a spray applied finish. Then you can actually put a guitar up top. If I had another piece of toolbox drawer liner, which I have the material, I may just cover the top of the box in that. So yeah, these drawer slides just worked beautifully. My projects are gonna fit amazing. This guitar needs a little bit of a fret level. That's coming up on my Skyscraper Guitars channel. Thanks for joining me on the guitar cabinet build here. I had an absolute blast doing this project. I always learn so much when I use new materials or put them together in a way that I haven't done before. So I hope you guys had as much fun watching this video as I did building this cabinet. Take care.
Feel free to click or tap on the images to check out some of my past builds. If you like my videos, click on the Greg's Garage logo and all my future videos will show up in your YouTube feed.